Come with me to a magical place where being labeled the pork queen is a compliment, where being nice is just a way of life, and where all leaders of the free world must pass through. Welcome to Iowa. Whether you're a current Iowan, an Iowa expat, or an Iowan at heart, this show is for you. This is the Iowa Podcast. Real Iowans, real talk, no drama. I'm Justin Brady, and today, Tony Timm, the CEO of Boys and Girls Club of Central Iowa, joins me. Tony, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to be here.
So there's obviously a rising homelessness problem, and we are going to talk all about that, and obviously how that impacts children. But before we get to that and how you as an Iowan can help, I have one request for you. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast. It is free. Your credit card will never be asked for. And you can subscribe on your favorite platform, whether that be Spotify, Amazon, Apple, Stitcher, iHeart, Google Podcasts. It's on all of the platforms. So make sure to subscribe. Make sure to tell a friend. And you know what? If you have some extra time, give it 5 stars, because that tells the platform to serve it up to other Iowans and other people that are smart, just like you. The Register, Virginia Beretta, writing for the Des Moines Register in Polk, wrote that the homeless population increased by 23% in the last year, and then the unsheltered population here's nearly doubled since January. So we're going to talk about the homeless population. We're going to talk about children. You are an expert in both of these areas. But the big question is, because I want to start broadly, what generally drives homelessness in Iowa? What's that big driver?
You know, from my past experience, I'd have to say that it's typically a combination of a couple of things. One, substance abuse, and 2, mental health. And those really are probably tied for first, going back and forth. A lot of folks that experience mental health are often self-medicating, trying to make things right for themselves, and that doesn't typically work. And so not dealing with some of those early traumas in their life lead to some of those other pathways that lead people down that path.
And in your opinion, has COVID changed the homeless population significantly in Des Moines? I think a lot of people probably assume it had some impact, but did it?
Yeah, I don't know if COVID directly, or if, some of the supports that were in place during COVID, as they fall off, more people are going to lose their housing if they were kind of on the edge anyway and had that rent pause, and now it's due, and so they can't pay it, and out they go. Some of it is, maybe the pandemic caused more substance abuse issues with the isolation and the time that everybody was, basically holding up at home and trying to figure out which way was up. I think, for every person that's experiencing homelessness, there's probably a different core reason that led them down that path. And that's typically what I see as one of the harder things for people to understand, is that it's not a one size fits all. It's not a lack of folks that have a desire to try. They're just dealing with a lot of things that have been brushed under the rug or not dealt with in the right way. And so they keep trying to navigate that on their own, and it doesn't work. And then they end up needing, the supports that are in our community to help them get back on their feet.
Yeah, so you were formerly at Central Iowa Shelter and Services, right? You were CEO over there. That was a while back.
Correct.
And what were the primary focuses then? Because obviously substance abuse and mental health issues, those aren't flip a switch solutions, right? You don't just get a flip a switch and it goes away. You don't just, it is a very broad challenge. So outside of meeting basic needs and getting shelter and getting resources and food to these individuals, what were the primary systemic changes and the primary holistic changes you were always trying to push for more change in?
Yeah, we would really, with our case management team, they would work with each individual when they came in the door and try to figure out what their path to us was and what the path back to being self-sufficient is. Some of them, they needed education. Maybe they hadn't completed high school. So if we could get them their high school equivalent, they'd be able to be better shot at being employed. some of them with substance abuse. And if they, were willing to admit they had an issue and wanted to seek help, they were often met with long wait times. And, today you have somebody who's experiencing life as an alcoholic that says, yes, I'm ready for help. If that's greeted with, great, in 6 months we'll get to you, it's a long time, right? And then you lose them. For the mental health side, a lot of folks, what I experienced was they would start taking their medication, things would become calmer, they'd see a path forward, then their mind told them they were doing really well and that they wouldn't need that medication, and they would stop taking it and kind of spiral backwards.
Interesting. So, one of the things I hear a lot about, I was actually just reading in the Register before, an old article, we're going to get to this too, there was a shelter project. This was after your tenure at Central Iowa Shelter and Services. But in this, it was the container village downtown that some people wanted to make. But in that article, there was a quote from a local community advocate, and it's a good quote. It's not a bad quote, but this individual said something like, "Any of us could be homeless at any time." And I've heard that a lot, that any of us could wind up homeless at any time. And I think it's often said to relate to individuals so they have more empathy. So I think the intent is right. But when we just throw around statements like that, I feel like it takes the spotlight off things we can actually do to change homelessness. So is it an accurate statement, or is it a bit more nuanced than that?
Yeah, I think, it's obvious that many of us live paycheck to paycheck. And if you are in that situation and you've already burned bridges with your family and your friends, and you've, you lose your housing, and then you couch surf for a while, and you're not finding a way up, and, the progression down spirals much quicker, and it's a long climb back. Right. And so I think it's, the obvious is, yes, any of us, any day, if we lost our income and our support network, we could find ourselves on a path to experiencing homelessness. Most of us have that support network in place yet,
sure, that
we haven't just totally burned the bridge now. And that's the safety net, which keeps a lot of people from progressing further.
Yeah. And so like that support system really is key, right? And so some people just don't have that. Some, like you said, some people have burned those bridges. Some people don't have it. It's not really my job or individual community job to determine what that original source was, right? It's our job to help our neighbor and help our friends that we see. So I don't want this to turn into we should diagnose the problem first, but no, just get people help, and then you can work backwards to find what that problem is. So I think we probably agree on that. But one of the things, like as far as community support, and again, this was after you were not at Central Iowa Shelter and Services, but there was a lot of news about this container village downtown. And this was, in my mind, one way the city and local community, this was a Central Iowa Shelter and Services project, I believe. And like I said, you weren't there, but there was this container village, for those that don't know. And I believe that either regulatory or certain regulations in the city got in the way of that project. Do you know much about that?
I'm not familiar with the ins and outs of that. I would also wonder if cost effectiveness, if it was
right
there, because while you can sometimes get those shipping containers donated, it takes a lot to retrofit for somebody to live in.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. And so when I was I remember tracking this story, and I think there was some issue where, like you said, the cost was going to be too great to retrofit these things because they had to meet certain occupancy standards that the city had set. And I'm not here to disagree whether those standards are good or bad, but my question was, well, would you rather living them in tents? Like, is that the better solution? So I guess what I wonder is, do you find that people trying to combat homelessness are trying to create these solutions, and they're finding community and civic leaders, in a way, it kind of seems like they're pushing against those efforts? And I know they're not trying to do that, but does it feel that way?
Yeah, I would say it's probably a topic you can look at from 100 different directions.
Right.
For folks that have nothing, you would assume that something is better than that. That being said, we also have this as a community. We also have a sense of what normal is, because we all believe that we are normal in our everyday efforts. And I would say for every person, that normal is different. And, for somebody that can function in a 200 square foot space, pay their limited amount of rent, follow the rules, those are all good things. And if that's what that person can achieve, then we shouldn't put a timeline on how to find success there and say, if they're not out in a year, it was a failure. They may be perfectly content living in that kind of environment long term. We don't all have to have, 3 or 4 bedroom homes or
right.
And so I think it's really just comes back to, at the core, what is a basic standard of living that we want to make sure everybody has access to? How do we support and provide that? And then, to your point, how do we stay out of the way of letting that happen at times? And that's the tricky part, right? Because we live in a litigious society where everybody's got an angle. And while it may be better, if it's not safe, then did you put them at more risk? Right? And so I think you have to evaluate each of those on its own merit as you move things forward.
And so obviously I want to move to kids, because that's something you and I are both passionate about. I used to be the president of the Downtown Des Moines Kiwanis Club here in Iowa, so this is something we really align on, and I'm really excited to have you on for that reason. But really briefly, before we move to that topic, I think this is like the number one debated thing whenever you talk about homelessness, which is the most highly visible aspect of it, which is the panhandlers on the side of the street that have the cardboard signs. And I think they're too positive. I'm going to ignore the negative perspectives, right? The negative perspectives being like, oh, well, they did it to themselves or something. But I believe there are two positive angles to look at this. Someone's like, I want to help, but because substance abuse and mental health is one of the bigger drivers, I'm afraid that I'll give them cash and they'll do something bad with it, right? That's the one thing. Like, you want to help them, but you don't know how. And then the other aspect is, you just give them cash and say, you know what? If they want to use it for the wrong thing, that's not me. My job is to help them. So as someone who has worked with these individuals and you've seen people recover, what is the best way to help when we see someone on the side of the road, outside of just ignoring them? How do we help them and ensure that, I guess I should just land that plane, right? How do we help them? What is the right way to do that?
I think whatever you choose as yourself to do, whether it's, giving them some bottles of water, seeing if they need a meal, sharing your travel toiletries with them if you don't need the little bars of soap and shampoo. I mean, you can really find ways to help people. I always just encourage people, whatever it is you do it from the fact that you're trying to help them without judgment. So it's not our job to police what they do. It's not our job to make sure they make the right choices. If you were experiencing homelessness and it was the end of a very long day, how would you spend that dollar that you got, right? And that's going to be different for each person. So, and no, nothing's going to change overnight. That to one of your earlier points, if somebody has a broken arm, we can quickly help them, and in just a few weeks they're healed and ready to go. When you start talking about homelessness and mental health and substance abuse, those are long-term commitments to see a change, and they're not cheap, right? And they come at a cost, but they come at a greater cost to those experiencing if we do nothing. And so to keep the hope going, you always have to find the ways in which you can try to make a small difference that leads to a bigger difference, I think.
Yeah, I would say I love what you said about toiletries and like bottles of water. Like, if there's something in your brain that you're hesitant, right, and you don't want to enable or do more harm than good, I would say, just based on what you said, the obvious solution here is buy a giant box of Cliff bars or energy bars or some nutrition bars and bottles of water and toiletry kits, and you can hand those out, and I'm pretty sure that they're going to utilize those, and they're going to find help through that. Right. No, I think that's actually a really brilliant thing. So I want to pivot over to children. When we see rises in homelessness like this, Is this negatively impact children, or is this a different socioeconomic class and they're mostly insulated from it? Because I know child homelessness is actually a rising problem, and this is one of the things you deal with.
Yeah, I would say it's rising as well, as we see families that lose their housing in the middle of a school year. They scramble to stay with a loved one or friends until they can get back on their feet. Typically, we'll see more youth experiencing homelessness in the summer because they're not in school being accounted for. So they're in other places that are maybe not as safe as what the school year they could be. I would say across the board, though, the youth that have had to experience being homeless, it leaves a lasting impression, right? And so those youth are getting off to an even harder start to overcome and be successful in school. If you're always worried about your next meal or the next place you're going to have warm to sleep, or if your peers are going to see you in some unfavorable condition where you're not the same as they are, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's just that chronic stress, especially on, my wife's an educator, and she teaches in a very tough district where there's a lot of poverty. And that chronic stress and that chronic tension, I think people don't fully understand this. You probably understand this, but I think people don't fully understand that chronic tension and stress really makes it difficult on brain development. And it makes it difficult to learn. It makes it difficult for them to thrive. And so there are so many facets to this. What is the main channel that you see students, and struggling kids, what's the main channel they kind of come through? Is there one theme you're seeing, one core problem within like homelessness in kids and the challenges they're facing? Is there a root cause here?
Yeah, I don't know if there's one single root cause. I would say for us, we've got 8 club sites and right now serving about 500 kids a day. We're short staffed, so we could be serving more if we can find staff. We have a wait list at some of them. But for the youth, we're seeing the big thing for them right now is the mental health themselves. Coming out of COVID, behaviors were up. Kids are struggling to be in groups. They've had some, difficult time just acclimating back to a group setting where they can focus on whatever project is next. And so we've had to go out and hire our own LMSW social worker. That individual spends a lot of time helping our staff de-escalate situations, find additional resources for families, because it can't just be, again, every child or every family doesn't need the same support. And so trying to sit down and have those conversations and align the support that's available in the community to the family that needs it, it's all time intensive. However, if we want youth to be successful in school at every age, right? So in elementary to junior high and junior high to high school, and come out of high school ready to either, continue their education or enter a workforce, a training program, they need a solid base. And that all starts very early in life. And so those front end investments that we can make will help down the road. And while there's not an immediate, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing thing, right? Like a revelation, we're building the framework in which the path for them to continue. And that takes a long time to get in place.
Right. I mean, so obviously you can't replace the foundation of like a broken home, right? Like I know a lot of kids are struggling because maybe there's a parent that's unavailable in the hospital, in prison, there's divorce, there's some brokenness of some kind where they're not getting that support system, right? So obviously you can't support them in the same way of that family support system. So what does that framework look like? How do you even begin to try to, I don't want to say replace, but at least supplement that foundation?
Yeah, I would say a large part of that is just our interactions that our staff have with seeing kids on a regular basis, right? We're a trusted adult. We're helping with homework. We're providing some opportunities for other access around either mental health or healthy choices in eating and physical exercise. We're having some fun time where kids are being creative and doing STEM and arts projects. And so really filling that, after school time to about 6 p.m. with core programmatic elements that hopefully are modeling positive choices and behavior for the youth that we're working with, and then that'll carry over into their home life as well.
And most of it is still volunteer driven. Is that correct?
We use volunteers. We'll use them to help with like checking in at club or helping with a specific program. But by and large, we are full and part-time staff driven, so that we guarantee that consistency and those connections to the youth.
Now, it was interesting. Actually, I didn't expect you to go into how COVID has changed behaviors in groups and acclimation. It makes perfect sense now that you say that, but that was completely off my radar. Did that change then how you do programming at Boys and Girls Club?
Yeah, I would say this, the year right after COVID, there was more time dedicated to reminding the basics, right? If you keep your hands to yourself, if you don't have anything nice to say, please don't say anything at all, right? Don't take your food and throw it. You need to finish it. So some of those core programmatic things that we just assume all kids understand, somehow in that 2-year period, it wasn't just the learning loss. It's like they lost the ability to mature, right? So you may have went home as a 3rd grader, you come back as a 5th, but you're still in that 3rd grader mindset because you haven't had those 2 years to grow with your peers and discover the world in that time. And so it's like, it was just on pause. Now I'm 2 years older, but nobody taught me how to live in those 2 years.
Yeah, I think there's a big gap in understanding there, right? Not until my wife started working in really high poverty areas did I realize, like, she was getting some students, I think it was an elementary school she was working at. She was getting students that didn't even know how to tie their shoes and really basic things that I would say some other more well-off districts experience. They come with a certain core, a certain foundational understanding of how to do certain things, how to behave, don't throw your sandwich, right? Right. But I think a lot of people don't fully understand some of the challenges you are dealing with, is which these students aren't coming with those basic understandings. So you're really starting at ground zero. Are there other examples of areas that you feel like you're kind of starting over?
I would say just in general, we live in a very insurance and finance driven community, and the buzzword right now is financial literacy. And I always have to remind all of my friends in that category that there's still a basic element of literacy that you have to have before we get to financial literacy. So reading at its core, if we can get you grade level reading, then, at some point you're just at the start, you're reading to learn how to read, but at some point you start reading to learn. Right? And so if we can get you over that hump where access to information and books is, just secondary to what you need. Like, you can just get it, right? You don't have to think about it. You don't have to look for it. It's just there. Your path forward is exponentially better than for those students who never make that over that hump.
Right. I want to go back to what you said a few minutes ago about the mental health issue. This is, Tony, I don't know what's going on, but it seems like across the board, and this is pre-COVID, across the board, we were really struggling, at least in the U.S. That's the only data I've looked at, sadly, but we were really struggling with a rise in mental health concerns. And of course, that is applying to children. What are you seeing as far as like mental health challenges, and how are you working with children to address those?
Yeah, so that with the addition of our social worker, right. She's able to spend some time with students when they're having some concerns. Things aren't going their way, they're acting out. We can try to step in on the front end and de-escalate that situation, figure out what's going on. Are there other resources we can connect to? I think for a lot of it, like, it's not that it didn't exist before, we just didn't acknowledge it, right? With that old pull yourself up, brush yourself off, get back in there. Mm-hmm. And we just assumed that we were making kids more resilient through that. And there's something to be said for that, right? We need to teach resiliency. We need to teach overcoming. But the playing field is not level and fair to all out there. So a lot of the kids we're working with are starting off, behind. And so we're trying to play catch up and remove those barriers, provide those opportunities. The youth we work with still have to do the hard work.
Right.
It's just, we're there trying to make sure they have the opportunity to succeed.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people listening to this are like, well, where are the schools? Like, what are the schools doing in this? Why are you shouldering this by yourself? And again, my wife teaches in a public school, so I'm not dogging on the public schools at all. I know what they deal with. I know what they struggle with. But are you working hand in hand with the schools? Do you have a good working relationship with them? Are you kind of delegating responsibilities? What does that relationship look like?
I would say we have a great partnership with the school district. We appreciate their willingness to let us be a partner. And 7 of our 8 clubs are in schools. And so kids transition out of school time right into us. If we're having concerns with one particular student, we can talk to the behavioral specialist at that school, figure out what's worked during the school day for them that we can bring over. We're also providing background information on what their club time was like and if we've had success. So it really is a group effort. I think back to when I was a kid. It's that old saying, right? It takes a village. When I was a kid, I took out the door, and there was any adult in town could correct me, put me in my place, right? And it's just there was no questions asked. And in fact, when I got home, my parents already knew I had screwed up, and so I was in double trouble.
Right.
We've somewhere along the way, because we want to be private and we're worried about information and we don't want anybody to tell us how to raise our kids. We got away from that village. It takes a village model. And we're seeing kind of the effects of that, right? Like none of us can parent all of it on our own. I've got 2 kids myself, but thankfully we've got a support network where sometimes, grandma can help or, a friend can help. And when you don't have those, it just makes it all that much harder.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk about how much of the programs you're working on because you guys are doing absolutely incredible work. I don't know what you're most passionate about right now, what you want the most attention to be drawn on, but you're doing a lot in, I would call it STEAM because you have it broken out. You have it STEM and the arts. I just call that STEAM. So, of course, I'm always a big proponent of STEAM. But there's academic support and homework assistance. There's education and career development. What's like the most exciting? I mean, they're all important, duh. But what's the most exciting thing or what's the thing that you are most passionate about and you want to talk about right now?
I would say coming up at the first part of the year, we have our Youth of the Year, which is a competition for high school. High school students compete based on an essay, a speech, and interview process. If they win locally, they go on to the next level, all the way up to the national level. Each level, there's scholarship money attached to it. I had an opportunity. I've only been here a couple of years now, and last year I had an opportunity to be a practice judge leading into that. And I said, I got this, right? All of my years of speech and public talking, I can look for eye contact and hand movement, and if you're fidgeting. And I started listening to these 5 wonderful young people standing in front of 5 complete strangers. And it was story after story on a very personal level. There was this young man of color, like 17 years old, standing in front of me, talking about how club truly lifted him up and was able to be the safe place for him to be who he was. And he could come out to his friends at club because he couldn't do that at home.
Wow.
And I sat there and quickly realized that the eye contact didn't matter. The hand moving didn't matter. Here's a young person that has the courage to stand up and tell 5 essentially strangers about this very personal journey he was on. And all I could think about was, we've done our job. We created that safe place. We allowed this student to develop. He has his voice going forward. That's what we need to be lifting up, is that every one of the youth we work with has the potential to be themselves. And that's what we're here to support.
So the obvious question here, Tony, obviously I appreciate your time. I know Iowans listening do, but the obvious question they all have is, okay, I'm a parent. My children are out of the house now, or I have resources, or I have money, or I have time. What are the things that you really need most right now? If someone believes in what you're doing and wants to help, what can they do specifically? And I'm thinking of categories, but maybe you have more of them, but I'm thinking maybe there's money they can donate. Maybe there's volunteer opportunities. Maybe there's partnerships and resources, internships. What are the best categories and how can they help?
Yeah, I would say we're always looking for volunteers, and we need we need donations. So that the work we do is about human capital investing in tomorrow's youth, right? So I need bodies that are well-trained and ready to go to have a positive impact on youth. And that comes at a cost. So
right.
we're not just daycare, right? We're actually investing in youth and making sure they're ready when they graduate high school to be career ready for whatever that career is for them. And so volunteers and donations are where we would categorize the need.
And you said well-trained. So do they need to come with training, or do you do that?
We will train staff and volunteers. We just need them to clear our background check process, and then we'll get them off and running into the core framework that they need to work on first, and then we'll build them up over that.
And what does that look like? What would they be doing on like a daily basis? Is there a certain amount of hours per week you want? I really want to paint that picture to kind of knock down any resistance or questions people have as they're listening to you.
Yeah, we can use volunteers at our front desk check-in. So kids come in after school and drop off their backpacks and books. You put them in a cube and you assign them to whatever group they're going to be in for the day, and they go off in groups of 15 with one staff. If you have a specialty, like maybe you're really into photography and you want to teach a group of kids how to do photography, we can arrange that. We'll assign you to one of our clubs. We'll find the kids that are interested, and then you can run the photography for like a semester. Maybe you're really passionate in that STEAM category and have an artistic ability to help create. We've got some sound studios. So if it's laying down tracks or making new beats, we have group volunteer activities where, a group of employees will come together and they'll spend the day cleaning and prepping and organizing. So really, if you want to work directly with kids, we have an opportunity. Some people are more behind the scenes and want to get things set up, and they're not so comfortable with the kids. And we start you there, but before long, you'll be out there with the kids, because they're the ones, you see the smiles, you get the hugs, and your heart melts for them.
That's really awesome. Yeah, I wanted to paint that clear picture because I know that sometimes people want to help, but they get nervous. They're like, I'm not good with kids. Or, that uncertainty in that gray area sometimes is just enough to keep people from action. So What is the easiest way, the most direct way to reach out to you, reach out to the Boys and Girls Club of Central Iowa and inquire, get involved, or donate? What's the most direct path to do that?
Our website is full of information, bgcci.org, and our phone number, 515, I'm going to mess that up. 515-242-7925.
And I can post all of that on iowapodcast.com. So if you're driving, you're listening to this, you're passionate about children, you want to help, you can go to iowapodcast.com. All of that information will be there to click on. Tony Timm, CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Central Iowa, thank you so much for spending time with me and everyone on the Iowa Podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the time. It was great to reconnect.
And to my fellow Iowans, Iowa expats, and Iowans at heart, thanks for listening and subscribing to the Iowa Podcast.